Are we Arab or African? Very controversial question that has been asked and debated for decades in Sudan. A lot of people begin their analysis from the war in 2023, which is incorrect. It's a big mistake.
So how bad was it then?
So people were still going out to Jama'ah in the mosque and they will get killed by stray bullets. The army's got this.
Yeah.
This is going to end soon.
Yeah.
But it didn't. They said this war would take a long time. How did they know that? Read between the lines. They were told, this is common knowledge in Sudan, the soldiers were told in their bases to remain there in a defensive position in case the RSF came. So there's many divisions of the army were not utilized at all. This was deliberate.
So what do they want then?
Who?
RSF, SAF?
If the RSF is the bullet, the UAE is the gun, the USA is the gunman.
You're saying those Russians in the RSF?
Wagner was in Sudan. Yeah, and Ukraine. There were Ukrainians in Sudan as well. So the US has an idea called blood borders, or it was named blood borders, popularized as blood borders, which is the redrawing of the Middle East, making the countries smaller.
More lines.
More lines.
If they succeed in dividing Sudan, who's next? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sudan is facing one of the worst crises, and whilst the media stays silent, social media is picking it up. With me is Yusuf Abu Sinan, political analyst at the Muslim Opinion and also half Sudanese himself. Before we start, I'd like to request that you like, share and subscribe to this video. We also need your help to continue bringing you content that builds the Islamic narrative, and you can do this by donating in the link in the description. Yusuf, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, so before we begin, I can see you're in traditional Sudanese attire. It looks Arab, but is Sudanese Arab or African?
Okay, so this is a question, very controversial question that has been asked and debated for decades in Sudan. Are we Arab or African? And to be honest, the answer is some people in Sudan are Arab and some people in Sudan are not Arab. I.e., some people in Sudan descend from Arab tribes and some don't, from local African tribes or from migratory African tribes. And that's the real answer. The issue is in the nation-state system today, identity became a problem because before, identity wasn't based on nationality, and there was no Sudanese nation before that. It was really just Islam was the identity, and then you had heritage or family or some identifiers like your tribe or your name, your family. But who we are was across the Muslim world just Muslim, until obviously the advent of nationalism with the expansion of colonialism from the West. So yes, so when Sudan was created as a new state, then this became a big question, which is, so what is our national identity? Is it Arab? Do we fit in with, the Arabs of, Egypt, Syria, especially during the Arab socialist era?
Or
are we African? Because obviously we look different, and obviously most Sudanese are black. I'm not, but yes, my family is mixed. So yeah, to be honest, it really comes down to, if you just ignore the nation state and stop trying to define a nation that doesn't really exist. Sudan is a location, a geographic location. Within it, there are people who are Arab and people who are not Arab, but everyone speaks Arabic.
So you're saying so everyone speaks Arabic, but is that because of Islam? Or is that, were they always speaking Arabic in Sudan?
Yeah, because of Islam.
Okay. So
anywhere outside of the Arabian Peninsula wasn't speaking Arabic before Islam expanded.
So how did Islam get there?
Okay, good question. So obviously, Islam came to what is now Sudan during the Khilafah of Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu. The reason why I say what is now Sudan is because historically, the name Sudan referred to a much bigger region. Which is basically everything south of the Sahara, or including some parts of the Sahara. So anything south of Egypt was Sudan until you reach Ethiopia. So between Egypt and Ethiopia is Sudan. But that also means everything south of like Libya. Yeah. The south of Libya itself is Sudan and Chad. the south of Tunisia, the south of Algeria. These are all parts of Sudan as well as Mali and Mauritania. So that's what historical Sudan is, which is why the location we call now the nation state of Sudan, Islam entered in the north of it during the Khilafah of Uthman bin Affan, but it didn't actually spread very far because of the strong presence of Coptic Christians. But Islam came much faster from West Africa. So in West Africa, in Mali, Niger, and these places, when they became Muslim, and Islam spread very quickly in West Africa, then it came back eastwards through Chad into Darfur. So the Christians ended up being in between the Muslims of Egypt and the Nuba and the Muslims of like Darfur, Kurdistan, south of them. And eventually the Christian states collapsed and Islam spread.
How did Islam spread to Sudan via trade or via jihad?
So obviously the initial was an attempted conquest by the Khilafah Rashida, which wasn't successful and ended with a peace treaty through which the first mosque was built. But later on, it was kind of a mixture. Most of it was through trade and most of it through dawah. But yeah, local sultanates came and they also expanded their territory. So there was jihad in Sudan as well.
So what's one interesting thing that about Sudan that most Muslims wouldn't know?
Okay, so Sudan was where the kiswa, the cover of the Kaaba, used to be made until like the early 1900s. From Darfur itself.
So Sudan had great designers.
I can't comment on that. I don't have a sense for design, but this is the cover of the Kaaba.
Yeah.
So yeah, it used to come from Darfur. It used to be made in Darfur, which is now the most devastated part of Sudan today.
Okay, so let's move on to the present day Sudan now. We're about 3 years into this current war in Sudan and a lot is unclear. Can you tell us about some of the events that have led up to this point?
This is a mammoth task, but I will try to
keep it as short as possible.
Give you a timeline. So the big news in the last 2-3 weeks, since taping obviously, is that the city of Al-Fashir fell. The capital of the Darfur region fell into the hands of the RSF, which was a big turning point in the war, actually.
RSF, who are those guys?
Right. So now to get to this point, we have to understand what happened before. But I'm not going to start at the beginning of the war, which is a big mistake a lot of people make. A lot of people.
So you're saying
you have to start the revolution. No, you have to start the revolution, yeah? Or even, if you want, even perhaps slightly before the revolution.
What was the revolution?
The revolution of 2019 is what's important. A lot of people begin their analysis, unfortunately, I've seen from the war in 2023, which is incorrect. It's a big mistake. It's a continuation. These events are a continuation of the revolution, 2019 revolution. To summarize that, people came out on the streets. It was unorganized initially. Some people began to organize it, and they managed to eventually bring the people down to sitting in front of the military headquarters. The organizers were connected to socialist and secular parties.
What do they want, these people? Like, why are they doing all of this?
The common man in the country had enough of the economic situation in Sudan, and had enough of being treated like dirt without dignity by the government. And that's what the feeling was in the street. And even the main chant was "Tasqut bas," just let it collapse. That's it. Just let this regime go. We'll think about what happens afterwards later.
Okay.
That was the feeling. Just let it go. Just fall. Had enough.
And the regime at the time was a military dictatorship.
It is a military dictatorship run by Omar al-Bashir. Now the secular and liberal parties, or the youth wings, who weren't outwardly affiliated, were the people who ran the protests. And under that pressure, the army moved the president, Bashir, to a safe location. That's what they said. So then the military council, either people running the country with Bashir, they all resigned. But only after they promoted an individual upwards. His name is Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who became the new head of the army, the head of the military regime. And then the liberal and socialist parties entered into negotiations with him to have a hybrid regime. Obviously, from his perspective is, if these guys can come into government with me and send the people home, then pressure is off from the military. That's what they wanted. So they entered into a hybrid regime, and this was sponsored and mediated and facilitated by foreign powers, known at that time Quartet or Quad now, 4 countries, US, UK, Saudi and UAE. The culmination of this transitional period of a hybrid government was that the army went back on their agreement and put the liberals in prison, arrested them, because
Whereas they were supposed to...
because they didn't want to. No, it was 1.5 years
on
army chairmanship of the transition, and then the 1.5 years the liberals, then elections. So during this 3-year period is you had this hybrid government of people who were not elected with the military, the old regime, under the supervision, if you like, of foreign powers. This was our transitional period, and then we'll have elections.
So after the first year and a half, they just put everyone in prison.
Yeah, the army wasn't gonna.
They weren't gonna change.
No, they just bought themselves time, so the protests subside. But that caused more protests, not as big as the first time, but enough to force the army to give in to more negotiations and to come up with a new transitional period, again under the same sponsorship and supervision of they used to say quartet more. I don't know why the translation keeps changing. Say Ruba'iyya, the 4 in Arabic.
Yeah.
The UN was involved more this time than the first time. And they came to an agreement in December 2022, which included some points which the army didn't like. Itself, the army didn't like. Burhan himself didn't like. But also his vice president, as in de facto vice president, because that wasn't a real position. But the number 2, that is Muhammad Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Himeti. That's how he's really known.
Head of the RSF at the moment.
Head of the RSF. He was the head of the RSF.
He was there.
Yeah, the RSF's been around for time. They're part of the military. So he's head of the army, and with him, head of the Navy, head of the Air Force. This is the head of the paramilitary, the rapid support forces, the auxiliaries.
Okay.
So there were some points Burhan himself didn't like about this, and some points which Hemeti specifically would have been affected by. So when it came time to implement this agreement, the new transitional framework, in April 2023, this war began.
Interesting. And so you're saying that...
So the agreement got cancelled by the ones who didn't really want the agreement to go through.
But they just agreed for the sake of the world watching and the Quad putting pressure on them.
Well, it's like the first time. They agreed under pressure as well, because the people were out on the streets and they thought they can buy themselves some time. So they agreed, bought themselves some time, and then amongst themselves they disagreed on how things should go and what to do about this agreement they just got into.
And this was all 3 years ago.
And the war just got out of hand.
And so how bad was it then?
Because it happened so suddenly, so quietly it seemed, and then it just descended into chaos, and there wasn't any declared intention of what was happening or what even was going on. And the country was already under emergency rule, and there already were curfews. There wasn't a new policy brought in by the state to tell the people, no, this is a new situation, and now change the way people live. It didn't. So people were still going out to Fajr in the mosque, for Jama'ah in the mosque, and they will get killed by stray bullets. People will still be kids will still be going to school and universities. It took a while for some of these things to stop, and for the society to realize this is not a normal situation. There are street fights that will flare up between the military and the RSF suddenly, and then the army started to do airstrikes against the RSF, which
people realized,
which would kill civilians as well. And the situation. So it's at a point where, for a lot of people, was do we leave or not? Because the army's got this.
Yeah,
this is going to end soon. But it didn't. And the longer it went, the more people started to leave. and the more the RSF actually took control of more parts of the capital. By the 7-8 month mark, the RSF had real control over Khartoum, Omdurman and Bahri, with small pockets where the army was besieged within. But otherwise they had full control. And they unleashed their terror onto the people. So then people started to leave en masse from Khartoum.
So give me a summary, 2023 to now, 2025. You've told us about 2023, the revolution in 2019, and how it's, what's happened in 2023 with the war breaking out. Now what's been happening?
So the war broke out in two main areas initially, which was one in Khartoum, the capital city, and then the second part is Darfur, which is the westernmost region of Sudan, where the RSF comes from. The RSF originally are Janjaweed militia. Janjaweed is Jinn ala Jawad. It is jinn on horseback, devils on horseback, if you like.
They gave them a more diplomatic name.
Yes, to formalize them. So they were informally created initially by President Bashir, ex-president, to deal with rebels in Darfur. The rebels in Darfur at that time, 2003, majority of them are from non-Arab tribes who had an issue with many issues, but it's exacerbated by Bashir's divide and rule policy. So he had a divide and rule policy, and he copied actually some policies from the British from 100 years prior, where he favored certain tribes over others, and then they would run the regional places, and people don't like whatever's going on there, deal with them.
So they use these small.
So the Janjaweed militia was created to combat major rebel militias that were getting arms from outside of Sudan, who were backed by foreign powers, to break up and divide Sudan, which is a recurring story of Sudan, by the way.
People try to divide it.
Yeah. So his response was, "I'll make a militia local from one of the Arab tribes I prefer," and then they would go against the rebels, most of whom are not from non-Arab tribes. And the RSF, over those first 7-8 months, took over Khartoum, took over Darfur, and then they started to converge in the middle. So
this is in 2023, or this is between 2023 and now.
Yeah, the beginning of the war was like this.
And at this time,
the RSF was defeating the army.
At this time, they were only fighting the army, or they're killing civilians as well.
So they would fight the army, and once they kick the army out, they have a town, they've completed control of the town, of the city, then they start going for the civilians.
But why though? The army is defeated. That's your enemy. Why go for the civilians?
This is the thing. It's like with the Zionists. They say they're only fighting Hamas, but let's look at their behavior. They're not just killing Hamas.
Yeah? So that's their tribalistic.
So their real enemy is not Hamas. It's all the Palestinians. That's what they're really targeting. And for the RSF, the army is not their enemy. Sorry, the army is not their only enemy. The war is against everyone who's not them. That's who the war is against. Everyone who is not them. Very simply, that's it.
So in summary then, 2023.
I gave you the summary at the beginning of the war.
Yeah,
which is they took control of Darfur, took control of Khartoum, and then they decided to expand in the middle, Kordofan, Jazeera, these areas, to connect their forces, and then started going into other parts of Sudan. And the army, to be honest, wasn't actually being beaten on the ground. It was making tactical withdrawals. Also, they claim.
What does that
I'm
mean?
not going to sugarcoat this. I do not believe the army made tactical withdrawals. They made deliberate withdrawals in order to give the RSF victories, because that's what their foreign backers were telling them to do. And when the army began its counterattack, it actually defeated the RSF very quickly. And it took back massive parts of Sudan very quickly.
Okay.
Now, there's one area which is important in Darfur that did not fall to the RSF and continued to resist for a very long time. That is the capital of Darfur, the city of Al-Fashir. Its fall after a 534-day siege and I think 266 assaults by the RSF. Its fall after all this time has changed the dynamics of the conflict. But in essence, after the army's counterattack, beginning of this year, and then getting into another stalemate because of foreign intervention, both sides were just waiting for Al-Fashir to fall, and it has. And that's basically where we are right now. That's the summary of the war. There's political reasons for this we can talk about, but that's a summary of the war. The RSF had initial advances, which were just gifted to them by the army.
But Al-Fashir was
Al-Fashir stayed as it is. It didn't fall to the RSF
until now.
Yes, the army did a counterattack.
How many days? 512 days. You said
534
days
siege. Yeah,
and that was the SAF, the army, which was keeping them at bay the whole time. It's a small contingent from the army, yes, as well as those rebel militias I mentioned earlier. The original rebel militias who have been fighting with the RSF for years now. Their base, because they have foreign backing as well. They were never allowed. The Sudanese army and RSF, obviously as part of the army, were never allowed to eliminate them because of foreign intervention, which we can talk about as well. There's a lot of history here. Yeah.
But basically, they remained. They were never defeated, and they remained, and they were given actually positions in government and areas which they can rule themselves. When this war broke out, they found themselves basically on the army side because the RSF became the common enemy. Even though originally it was the other way around. They were the enemy to both the RSF and the army.
Okay, so you made a lot of big claims here. You said that the SAF made tactical withdrawals, but you're saying that you don't believe what they're saying. Why? Like, what's your reason to think that?
1, 2, 3, 4 tactical withdrawals make sense. Yeah, but not every single time. Every single time doesn't make sense, and not when it also coincides with meetings with foreign powers. And the other thing is, and this is why I said the mistake a lot of even analysts.
So they meet and then they withdraw.
Sometimes that's how it happens. Okay. I mean, in Al-Fashir, that's how it happened with Al-Fashir.
Okay.
They went to Washington DC. The army went to Washington DC, and on the same day they arrived, the army withdraws from Al-Fashir.
And the RSF comes in and starts killing people.
Yeah. And the army withdrawing left those rebels by themselves, and even the soldiers by themselves, because it was the army's leadership that left them without command. And then the RSF managed to overrun them in 2 days.
Wow.
So yeah, sometimes it happens like that, in that order. Sometimes it's not in that order, but it's consistent. And in the first 8 months of the war, 7 to 8 months of the war, the army was staying in its barracks, in their bases around the country. So they weren't sending reinforcements from other parts of the country. They were told, this is common knowledge in Sudan, the soldiers were told in their bases to remain there in a defensive position in case the RSF came. They follow orders. They don't have knowledge of what's going on around the country, especially with the internet and the news being especially blocked in the beginning of the war. It really was blocked. So whatever image they had was probably that the RSF could come at any moment, even though the RSF was nowhere near them. So there's many divisions of the army were not utilized at all. This was deliberate. But the most important thing is that you have to start looking at this from the revolution, not from the beginning of the war, because the involvement of the foreign powers was started very clearly at that time, and it carried on. People who saw the war, sometimes they see the ones fighting, and they don't see who's behind them. But if you're following the revolution if you were following from before, during the revolution, then you see those fighting, and you also see the foreign powers, and you notice what's happening at the same time.
So what do they want then?
Who?
RSF, SAF.
Okay. So the RSF, to be honest, are living in a dream. What they tell their followers is never going to happen. But it keeps them motivated to fight at least.
So we're going to have the whole of Sudan.
Yeah, they're going to somehow have the whole of Sudan. And they're going to end up ruling over everyone else. And show their superiority as their tribe over everyone.
Okay.
And that keeps them motivated. But to be honest, most of the RSF now, are foreign mercenaries.
From where?
From around the world. So most of the fighting force of the RSF are foreign mercenaries now. So whatever they use to motivate their own people is that, but most of their fighting power is just hired people. They're fighting for money. Everywhere, like even
and who's hiring these people?
Chad,
RSF
South Sudan,
themselves.
Niger, for a time Russia, Colombia.
You're saying those Russians in the RSF?
Wagner was in Sudan.
Interesting.
Yeah, and Ukraine. There were Ukrainians in Sudan as well.
How comes we haven't seen any of these? Because you see these.
No, these things are in the news. They're in the news. They're not hidden. They're just not reported. A lot of things are just not. They don't make it to mainstream news, but they're not hidden. They're not hidden.
But you're not saying that these countries were supporting this. You're saying that
these are mercenaries. These are
were
mercenaries
just hired on the black market or something to come over and to.
Yeah, but the countries know. They know what's happening. If they wanted to ban it, they would ban it.
Okay, so yeah, let's go back to it then. RSF, what do they want?
Yeah, so that's what the RSF followership are told. But the leadership of the RSF, who have a relationship that goes back in time, yeah, with the United Arab Emirates and with the USA, they probably understand that they will not have all of Sudan. They will have maybe Darfur. They will rule Darfur,
which they already had. No, as in like that was always their base.
Yeah, but now it becomes an independent state. Independent state. Remember, there's a spark for this war, which was to destroy that transitional agreement. That's the spark of the war. And then things carried on in a way where it sort of got out of hand, but the foreigners came back, the foreign powers came back to control it. And they've changed, if you like, direction. There's a new objective, new aim behind this war, which is the hatred and the killing that will happen now between the RSF and the rest of Sudan will create a situation where the RSF can actually separate Darfur, which is an old American plan, by the way, which they were working on before even the revolution began, but they can come back to it now.
What is it?
So the RSF, the Darfur becomes a separate state. It separates, it becomes a new country, a new nation.
But why? Why separate Sudan? Why is that an American plan?
Okay, we'll get to that. Inshallah. But understand this is really what the RSF will get if things carry on as they are. And that's why there was a stalemate for a while until Al-Fashir fell. Because now that they have de facto control over all of Darfur, they can come to the negotiating table and say, yeah, but we have this. Yeah. So we can give up something here, but this is what we have. These are our cards, and Darfur, all of Darfur is the main. It's the trump card.
Okay, and in summary,
no pun intended.
The army. What did the army want? Why are they just not basically putting up much of a fight?
So again, the army on the ground, like the RSF, they have their own story for the people on the ground. For the army, it is we're fighting against the RSF because they're the aggressor. They are the aggressors. The Sudanese army's job is to protect the Sudanese people. Is it not? So the soldiers are fighting for protecting the people, for protecting the land, for protecting honor, for protecting wealth. And there are many volunteers who have joined the army. That's what they're fighting for. The leadership.
The people.
The soldiers and the junior officers and even high-ranking officers. It's the leadership. And again, we have to start history. History did not begin in April 2023. History began before that. The leadership is handpicked, chosen and handpicked by the previous regime. The previous regime that had already submitted to the USA before it fell. It just fell because of the people. The head of the army, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has a very strong relationship with America and with MBS and Sisi. He went and signed the Abraham Accords. People forget this. He actually shook Netanyahu's hand. So the leadership of the army is just following orders as well.
It's following orders from America.
Yeah, it's following. Yeah.
And America want him to not put up too much of a fight, because if he does, he would destroy that.
They will destroy the RSF very quickly.
And then there'll be no rebellion.
They'll wipe them out. Yeah.
And then they'll have the full Sudan once again.
Yeah.
And they don't want that. They want.
But because that creates the justification for a separate state.
Yeah.
That there is a de facto rulership there now. There is actually a separate entity.
Whereas if the SAF just wipe out the RSF, then there's no discussion to be had.
No.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so where does the UAE fit into all of this plan? Because they're a big part of the discussion at the moment.
So the UAE is the if the RSF is the bullet, the UAE is the gun. The USA is the gunman. But the UAE is the gun which everyone sees. Not everyone sees the gunman. Everyone sees the gun. Everyone sees the bullet. Without the UAE, the RSF would be finished as well. The need for foreign support, physical, material foreign support, for the RSF to just stay on the battlefield, military, financial support, became so much more important after the war began. I say this because remember the UAE already had a relationship with the RSF before. I said it the other way around before. Hemeti had a relationship with them. But the UAE had a relationship with the RSF as well. They used to hire them. They hired them to fight in Yemen. Remember when Saudi had this war in Yemen? And they made a coalition of Arab countries and the UAE was its main partner? The UAE didn't fight on the ground. They hired the RSF. They brought the RSF over from Sudan. So they already had a relationship with the RSF. The RSF had already been handed over gold mines by the state in Sudan. Because remember, the RSF was part of the state. And they used to sell most of the gold to the UAE. And just before the war began as well, the UAE had a few Emirati delegations visited Darfur and surveying land, looking for investment opportunities. So the UAE has a strong relationship with the RSF from before the war. And the RSF really needed support. Otherwise, they would just run out of ammunition. That's all it would take. They don't make their own ammunition.
And
they would just run out.
Yeah.
And the Sudanese army would win. So part of the American plan is you need someone to actually beef up the RSF on the ground. That's the role the UAE took up.
Okay.
They already had a relationship with the RSF anyway. And they've been... Maybe it's not just that made them a good candidate, but also the fact that they don't really care about how they look. Whereas other American allies / client states might hesitate to do this kind of dirty work, to be involved with this, and it really would hurt their reputation.
To look like savages and just ruin their reputation.
Yeah, and I don't think the UAE cares that much.
Okay, so earlier we were just speaking, and you mentioned that there are three top narratives or main narratives out there around.
3 big ones, yeah.
Yeah, 3 big ones that people are discussing. And I thought, why not debunk them or discuss them in detail and try to figure out why is it that people have these narratives or these thoughts around what's happening. And one of those was, is this a civil war between 2 generals? That's what people think out there. That is a civil war between, the RSF and the SAF, and that's all it is.
Yeah, so it can seem that way on the surface, but there are also those who have been deliberately trying to portray it that way. So when you talk about Sudan, they'll be like, it's just Africa. That happens in Africa. It's just about power. 2 generals, 2 warlords.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And they can't blame anyone but themselves. They do this to themselves. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen people say that.
Yeah.
You've seen people say that. So this narrative does 2 things. One, it completely makes the foreign backers invisible.
It makes it about them.
It makes the foreign backers invisible. And when they become invisible, they can act the way they want. Because there can be backlash in public opinion, not just on the ground in Sudan, which will affect where they're trying to take Sudan, but also global public opinion has their reputation. They imagine everyone it was common knowledge that the USA is behind the RSF. How would people treat the USA and the US government? How would the Sudanese treat the US government? Would you have the Sudanese government now saying things like, we welcome America's efforts at solving and mediating? Would they be saying that, or would they be treating the USA as an enemy?
Yeah.
So it really hurts politically what they can and can't do. So this narrative makes the foreign backers invisible. Second thing it does is when it equates between both sides, between the RSF militia and the national army, between the aggressor who's attacking people in their homes and the institution whose job and role is to protect the people. And they're not actively going around killing people in their homes. They have done airstrikes indiscriminately, which has killed people. That is true. Then you end up in a situation where you don't have to take sides. Say they're both like each other. And when you don't take sides, you preserve both sides. That's the key thing for the USA, who's really behind this, is really the USA, this narrative. That's how they've been talking about it for a while. Before things became big in the news, RSF, UAE, this is the way the USA was actually talking about it. They need to stop fighting, both of them.
Put them both in equal standing.
Yeah, and then what? When you come to solve the problem, you say you sit down, as opposed to this is the legitimate state, and this is a terrorist militia. It is
Which
terrorist.
is what it is.
Yeah, so we put sanctions on it, and we fight it the way we fight other terrorists around. No. So when you treat it that way, you can have them both sit down as equals and negotiate and create two countries out of one. So yeah, this is deliberate by the US.
But doesn't the USA say that, you know, this war can't be ended through any military intervention? It has to be.
They say there cannot be a military solution. That's what they say.
Yeah.
So it's
peace talks,
yeah,
diplomacy.
yeah. Come on, man. This is code. When the USA says they did this in Syria, it's very important to study the other activities the US does and see these things as connected and learn.
Follow the patterns.
Yes. When they say they cannot be a military solution, they used to say this in Syria. They mean we do not want a military solution. They say they can't be one, so that you think there can't be one. Doesn't actually physically mean there can't be one. So when everyone thinks there can't be one and we have to talk, then what do you get? The same thing, preserve both sides.
Yeah.
But if you let the war carry on and you don't use all these maneuvers to, punctuate the military's advance through ceasefires. Remember they did that in Syria. They ruined the advance of certain the rebels there, the revolutionaries there.
Yeah, calling ceasefires.
Through ceasefires. Yes, that protected Bashar al-Assad.
The moment they were making progress.
Yeah, so they did that in Sudan as well. They blocked the army's movement also through ceasefires and through other activities. The army would win. If you don't bring in the UAE to help out the RSF, the army would win. The army wins. We said this earlier, and you squash the rebel militia in Darfur. Then what? Sudan is still Sudan. It's not two countries, it's one country. So yeah, the USA has it shifted. I said it took a while for the war got out of hand, then they intervened. I'm talking about the first 3 weeks, because by the third week, that's when they said there cannot be a military solution, and they said this war would take a long time. They said it might take a long time. How did they know that? No, they say that because they want you to think that. So sometimes you have to read between the lines. The USA may say things which sound informative, but they're actually psychologically getting you to think that is actually what's happening. But that's actually what they want to happen.
Okay, so in summary, that first narrative, summarize it. Yeah,
in summary, it is not a civil war. It's a proxy war. It's a proxy war. Foreign powers have tools on the ground who, whatever genuine disagreements they had at the beginning of the war, do not matter now. There are tools now in dividing Sudan.
All right, so the second narrative, the UAE is driving the war in Sudan.
So this is a view which a lot of Sudanese have, and it's the result and the combination of a lot of work, good work in actually
convincing,
in spreading the awareness that this war is not just between Hemeti and Burhan. There are foreign powers involved. And it took a while, actually, to get people to realize this. And that this is not something which we can just solve by focusing on the players on the ground. You have to cut the foreign intervention and the foreign assistance that exists. But it's not enough, because the awareness isn't complete yet to see the gunman. We see the gun.
We see the gun. We see the gun.
We see the gun now.
And who's behind it?
Yeah. So with the RSF was the bullet. Everyone saw the bullet. Now people have started to see the gun. The gun. Now the Sudanese, I'm saying,
UAE.
Now around the world, but the Sudanese have seen it for a while. But to be honest, it only became common in Sudan after the army's counterattack. Really, because when the army did their counterattack, and they pushed the RSF very quickly out of so many areas, and they found all these Emirati equipment, the Emirati flags on it. Yeah, that's hard evidence. That was hard evidence.
Yeah, kept the labels on them.
Yeah. So but before that, a lot of activists, not a lot, but some few activists and political parties and so on started mentioning the UAE, because we've been following the events from before. We already knew they were involved. The quartet already existed, or now it's called Quad. The 4 countries were already there. The UAE already had a close relationship with the RSF. When the war began, it was immediately looking at what's happening. You're looking for that. You're not just looking immediately just at the events on the ground. You're also looking at what the UAE is doing as well. and the assistance they would be sending to the RSF. So from the beginning of the war, the early stages of the war, some of us already knew the UAE was involved. But now this is public knowledge because the army found hard evidence, irrefutable hard evidence. The next thing is understanding that UAE is actually just the gun and not the gunman, because the UAE is not a great power. This is like a rule of like human history.
Yeah,
the great powers influence the smaller ones. The USA decides, not the UAE. And the USA has been involved in Sudan before the revolution and in the entire region. Did you not see how the Saudis, Qataris, and Emiratis, I'm talking about the states, obviously, yeah, they were competing against each other when Trump visited.
Yeah, who can give him the most money?
Yeah, and who could impress him the most?
Yeah,
to impress him.
But you say that the UAE is basically just taking orders from the USA, but they say that they're fighting Ikhwan.
Yeah.
Is this Israel-Hamas thing all over again?
So, oh yes, absolutely. But not exactly in that Hamas actually does exist, and the Israelis they're saying something at least. The Ikhwan are not the army in Sudan. You know,
so made up this whole thing.
No, so understand this, yeah. Omar al-Bashir, the previous president, the old regime in Sudan, the one the revolution came out against, he came from a coalition of Islamic movements. One of them was called the Islamic Movement, the biggest coalition. And the Islamic movement as a coalition at one point included the Muslim Brotherhood in it as well. Bashir came to power, and then he turned on the Islamic movement, or he split the Islamic movement, made his own political party, the National Congress, and he split that movement. So some people joined him, and others went into opposition against him from the Islamic parties, the Islamic parties, Islam-leaning parties. They're not all what do you call it? They're not all strictly Islamic in the sense that they have an Islamic program or constitution, but they have Islam as an identity, juxtaposed against secular or liberal or socialist identities. So the Islamists, so-called, have been in government for a long time. Even though the system in Sudan wasn't actually Sharia, they claim to have it. But from the beginning of Bashir's time to the end, you can draw almost like a trend graph that goes an increase in Islamic laws, and then it just goes down as they de-Islamize themselves. And he admitted to it later on in his life anyway. He said, our Sharia is diluted, like when you put a biscuit in tea, it comes diluted. That's our Sharia. That's what he said. His own admission.
So you're saying,
but the Islamist parties and groups were connected to him for a long time. So now the Emirates is not going to explain that to the West. They don't know any of that. Yeah. But they know Ikhwan.
They know Ikhwan, yeah. They know Ikhwan was there.
Yeah. So just say Ikhwan, and that works in the media in the West. So the UAE themselves haven't officially, so far, admitted to supporting the RSF. They haven't yet. But they have the RSF saying this. So this is the RSF talking point. They've taught them to say this, that if you want to maintain if you don't want to get destroyed in the media, because there are Sudanese activists who are working hard to expose them and expose them what they're doing. So then that makes things hard for the USA to Iran to treat them both as equals. If everyone shows that you're actually a terrorist, a real terrorist. So improve your image. What do you do? Improve your image. Say that you're fighting against Ikhwan, and you'll be good in the West.
In summary,
that will cleanse your name. Whatever you do is fine because you're fighting Ikhwan.
You're fighting the Islamists.
Yeah, but Ikhwan is the name the West knows, isn't it?
Oh yeah. So in summary, point in terms.
The UAE is not leading the coalition. It is the biggest backer financially and militarily for the RSF. Without them, the RSF would be nowhere. But the USA is the leader. The USA is the gunman. The UAE is the gun. The RSF are the bullet. And it's important to know this because the USA can replace the gun if it needs to. If it becomes a liability, it will replace the gun. Someone else will start shooting.
And ultimately, Ikhwan is just an excuse, you're saying?
Yep.
So, okay, so let's move on to narrative number 3, which is that this war is about gold, resources, and seaports.
Yes. So this war is about, in reality, it's about the transition of power in Sudan. And therefore, it's actually about the Sudanese themselves. It's
Not
about
the
this.
gold.
No. So the gold, the UAE had most of Sudan's gold before. Anyway, they had most of Sudan's gold anyway. They were buying it from the RSF. The RSF had the gold mines with the blessing of the army leadership, because they were part of the army. Everything was fine, and they had the investment opportunities in Darfur under the RSF with the blessing of the Sudanese army. They have land on the Nile given to them by the Sudanese army. They had no problems at all.
So you're saying the UAE already had gold?
They have a bit more now,
Yeah.
but not significantly more.
It's not enough to be doing what they
It
do.
doesn't explain. It doesn't justify the effort put into this war.
Okay.
And again, that's also assuming that the UAE is the one that started the war unilaterally. It wasn't. It was the Quad together, and them trying to move the revolution, to take control of the revolution, and move it in a way where they can decide what the next regime and government in Sudan would actually be. And their disagreements amongst themselves led to this conflict, because each one has his tools on the ground. RSF, the army, Burhan, the liberal secular parties. Again, that was most of them were backed by the UK. The real meddling point here, that the UK really wanted to put them in and have them have supremacy over the military, which the USA would say in public, but in reality couldn't trust them. And so they blew up this agreement, and then eventually the war became into something else, which was, we'll use it as an opportunity now to divide Sudan. And everyone took their seats on the table. So this is really what the war is about. The history did not begin in April 2023. This war did not begin really at that time. It starts with the revolution in 2019. And it's a war on the surface of it between these two guys. But in reality, it's a war by these foreign powers against the Sudanese people who did the revolution. Yes, who did the revolution, who broke out, who dared to break out of the system imposed upon them by foreign powers. Omar Bashir's regime was a client state. It was. He was good at talking. He was good at looking big. But he split Eritrea from Ethiopia for America. He split South Sudan from Sudan itself for America. He started de-Islamizing Sudan for America. He began normalization, by the way, for America. All of these things, when he was becoming more obedient, the revolution came in and ruined it for him. But if the revolution did not happen, he was going to come here anyway. Sudan was going to come this way anyway, towards normalization anyway. It was going to come towards de-Islamizing anyway from the regime. It was doing that anyway. And it was going towards division anyway, by his own hands. So the revolution came, the people came out, and they threatened to actually become independent. And that was dangerous for America. This is why it is actually connected to the Arab Spring. It was dangerous for America, it's dangerous for Egypt, Sisi's Egypt, it's dangerous for MBS, dangerous for MBZ.
Why? Why is it if Sudan breaks
No,
out?
no, it's not just Sudan. Not just Sudan. They reacted to every revolution.
Okay.
They reacted.
Yeah,
these
America
countries
reacted to every
and these countries as well. The Saudis and the Emiratis, they all reacted to all these revolutions as well, to quell them, stop them from coming to them. That's the main interest they have in this, and why they're willing volunteers for the USA in this. They're not. The UAE
They're scared for themselves.
Yeah, they're threatened. They're threatened. And the thing about Sudan is, unlike, for example, in Egypt, Sudan has a more open political sphere. It has a lot more political parties who were persecuted but allowed to operate. And what that means is, if Sudan actually becomes independent and there's no foreign interference, and the military actually steps back from power and acts just as a military. So no one can actually then take over, even from a foreign power, through a military man and impose its will on Sudan. That Sudan will end up becoming an Islamic state. Inevitably. Because if you allow open debate and dialogue, and the best idea will win, the best idea, or the idea which everyone believes in, which can convince the people, it will come to that. Almost inevitably. If not immediately, inevitably it will. And any independent Islamic regime in the Middle East is dangerous for US hegemony, and dangerous for these client states as well.
In case it spills
Because it will
naturally, like it did.
Yeah, it will move. It will spread. And then you end up with a united Islamic state, maybe a khilafah as well. So that's really what this war is about, because it doesn't start in April 2023. It's a culmination of attempts to quell the revolution that ended up this way. And then afterwards, because opportunity presented itself, after they've destroyed the revolution now, that, let's split Sudan.
You say that, but a lot of people would disagree with you, and they would say that actually the revolution in 2019 was pro-democracy and anti-Sharia, which goes against everything you're saying right now, which is actually, it would have naturally went towards Sharia and naturally went towards Islam, but actually people were saying that the people were actually calling for democracy and not a Sharia. So why would America need this war in the first place if it was already going the way that they would have wanted it to?
Yeah, so no, that's just not true. The Sudanese people's chants, the big ones, were Taskut best, just let it fall. There's no ideology in that.
Okay.
Yeah, there wasn't pro-Islam, wasn't pro-democracy. It just end this now. That's all it was. It was Madaniya. Madaniya gets translated here in the West as like civil state, which is a secular state, but that's not what they meant. They meant civilian. Madaniya is opposite of military. Civilian opposite of military. That's all it meant. It didn't mean anything else. Nothing else. Just don't want the army in charge anymore. No view on what happens after that. And they said Hurriya Salam wa Adala, which was a trick used by these, I mentioned earlier, the socialist and liberal parties, because they meant by it freedom, peace and justice, Hurriya Salam wa Adala. And what they meant by it is not what people meant by it. They were telling people freedom from military rule. That's what they were telling them. That's what we mean by freedom. And peace as in end to all the conflicts and the rebellions that are occurring in Sudan. Okay, first one's reasonable, second one's reasonable, and third one is justice. Very vague idea, which is also reasonable. But what they actually believed in is freedom, as in freedom from God. That's what they really believed in, actual Western freedom. And by peace, they were actually going towards. What they really meant by it is it's not just ending the war with the rebels, but creating a national identity. So us and the rebels and everyone else become
live in peace.
Sudanese. Yeah, not
as one people.
Yeah, but as a secular people, not Islamic, not Arab, not anything else. And I'm not saying we're supposed to be Arab or not Arab, but it was about creating a new identity where some of those rebels, some of them are very un-Islamic, but they wanted to make it an anti-Islam, actually, some of them, very secular. And there are some obviously in the south who are not even Muslim. In the south of the current Sudan, not South Sudan.
Yeah.
And bringing them in together, that the peace they are talking about is a new nationality, a new identity. That's what they meant, because Islam was because Sudan was claiming to be Arab and claiming to be African and claiming to be Islamic at the same time, and they wanted to do none of that. And the third, by justice, they mean social justice, i.e., equality. That's really what they meant. So that was them. It wasn't the people. They were saying these, and they were deliberately tricking the people. But when you ask the people, when you talk to them, every Sudanese, they just meant army goes, civilian government, we'll think about everything else later. And that's why during the first transitional phase, the first one, 2019, during the negotiations between the army and the leaders of these political parties, the ones who were saying we will establish democracy, and that's what they were saying to people outside the country, and that's what we will bring to Sudan. And when they tell the Sudanese people is we'll bring democracy is elections. Yeah, that's what they were saying. It's just elections, nothing else. During those negotiations, when they were being very obstinate and saying, we're not going to give us more ministries, for example, because our military was saying, we will have ministries, you will have ministries. We're not giving full power. The army's response, and they will say this in public, they will go out on camera, they will go on Al Jazeera on a press conference and say, we'll do elections. Let's just do elections now. And the other side would say no. The liberal parties would say no. Why? Because they knew they would lose. And the army knew if elections happen, these guys will be destroyed.
Because the people didn't want...
Because if you start talking about programs, and you start talking about policies, then they will lose, because they are completely detached from the
reality of the people.
From the actual cultural fabric of Sudanese society.
So in summary, you're saying it wasn't that the people were calling for democracy, but actually the people just wanted an end to the current or the regime back then, and just, they wanted peace, they wanted unity of their people, and they weren't really sure what was to come after that, but they just knew that.
Everyone was saying, we're not thinking about what happens next.
Okay.
Some of us were trying to get that conversation going, because that's the lesson we learned from the Arab Spring, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can all be united on what we don't want, but if we're not united on what we do want, then we're going to get an imposition from the foreign powers.
Yeah,
that's what happened. That's how it happened everywhere else, isn't it? Because the movement was in one direction to bring this guy down, then there was no movement in one direction to bring something else. So the movement died after that. But yeah, tried hard, and others did as well, to try and move the conversation towards so what do we want to replace him with? But the reality is, the revolution was just about removing Bashir and the military, and that's it. That's all it was about. Nothing else.
Okay, so aside from those narratives, which I think we've addressed now, I want to go back to one point that I mentioned earlier, which you said we'd come back to, which is America. So what is there? Because you mentioned they have a plan, and they've had a plan for a long time, and they've just been enacting that plan slowly over these last decades. What is that plan? What do they want for the Middle East?
Well, not slowly, but let's say the USA comes back to it. The USA is human. They're humans. They have capacity. They can't do everything at the same time.
Yeah.
And things happen, and they have to respond to those things and react to them. So the US has an idea called blood borders, or it was named blood borders, popularized as blood borders, which is the redrawing of the Middle East on lines.
The Sykes-Picot.
Changing Sykes-Picot.
Okay.
Making the countries smaller.
More lines.
Yes. Or maybe less straight lines, because they want to redraw it based on ethnic or sectarian lines instead of straight lines. So it is to break it up even further, and they started this, and you can see it in the behavior wherever they go, is they actually encourage division, and they will start where they can by assisting separatist movements, and those separatist movements, when they become big and important, they get space on international media, and then eventually they will try to move on to giving them semi-autonomous rule, and eventually try to move it towards official separation. And the only country, well, not the only country, but they have succeeded, the major one that succeeded in is Sudan, when they separated South Sudan from Sudan. But they've administratively broken up Iraq. So Iraq formally is still one country, but the Kurds have semi-autonomous rule where they are. And Lebanon was divided. Again, it looks like one country on the map, but it's divided into 3 zones in reality.
What are those 3?
Yeah, Sunni and Christian. And in Pakistan, there is support for Baloch rebels. Who have, and this is the thing, they have genuine grievances, like the ones in South Sudan. They had genuine grievances against the government in Khartoum.
But they escalated those grievances instead of...
And they exploit them.
They
exploit them, and they want to eventually move on to perhaps creating a Balochi state. But then there's capacity issues. Things happen, and then they stop either funding, or they just leave it on the back burner. There's other things that happen.
Yeah.
So with Sudan, South Sudan split 2010, 2011, and immediately moved on to Darfur. Immediately. At the same time, 2009 first conference, 2011 next conference. The conferences that brought peace between the rebels the original rebels of Darfur and the government, which protected those rebels, kept them in place, so the government can never actually eliminate them. They brokered peace through Doha and through Qatar and the UN. And that was the original idea. Those rebels would be the creation of a new state in Darfur. And slowly, they grew their support as they themselves on the ground. So they would recruit people with the money that they were getting from outside. They'd be able to hire more people and prove to the people on the ground that they're the ones who look after them and bring them jobs, not the government and not the central government. But the Arab Spring happened, and America got busy, and then eventually this revolution happened in Sudan, and the RSF it ended up becoming the more powerful player actually in Darfur. So the US switched its plans. So the RSF will be the one now to create a new separate state, not those rebels. So we let the RSF now defeat those rebels, and once they do it, and they did when they took Al-Fashir now, the RSF will be the ones prepared for the takeover. So Yemen is divided. Now Yemen is divided.
A big question. What do you think is next for America's plan? I mean, we have Sudan now. If they succeed in dividing Sudan, who's next?
Well, I think next is Sudan anyway, which is Darfur. And they've already started to train. Militias have appeared in the east and the north of Sudan. There already is one in the south of the current Sudan. And the militias in the east are getting trained by the Eritrean army, another American allied state.
Wait, so you're saying the RSF?
There is a militia right now in the east, not RSF, no one else. It's a local militia in the east that is getting trained by the Eritrean army now. And the Sudanese state knows this.
Under the orders of America.
The Sudanese state knows this. The Sudanese state, client American state. Saudi, client American state. Eritrea, same. The Sudanese state knows this, and they do
know
nothing about it. Yeah, because the
militia being trained.
The Sudanese state, I'm talking about the leadership, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they are happy to see militias spring up everywhere. They're part of the plan.
How many countries are they trying to divide Sudan in?
Sudan, so there was a report a long time ago that said 3 countries, and another one that said 5. But I don't think the USA plans in an idealistic way like this. I think it's
whatever looks
pragmatic.
Better.
Yeah, so South Sudan was first. Darfur is pragmatic as well because you can create the state through the RSF. Even the east and the north of Sudan, it's not clear where the lines are between them because these are almost entirely Arab tribes that live both sides. So they'll get to that, but it's not going to be a big priority. A big priority is probably going to be Syria. The Israelis want to break Syria up immediately into smaller countries immediately, and they want to create a Druze area and an Alawi area and a Kurdish area. And the Americans originally had that same plan, but the Turks don't want a Kurdish state. So the Turks are against it. The Israelis are for it. And right now Trump seems to be, he likes Erdogan more than Netanyahu. So in the immediate term, the USA will probably resist breaking up Syria in the immediate term until it can get a situation which works for the Turks as well. Or maybe after the Turkish regime changes and there's no value in the next, there's not a strong man like Erdogan who's a very useful ally in the region.
Yeah,
then they'll go back to the original one, the Kurds, trying to give the Kurds a state because the Kurds have been betrayed by the Americans. That was a public, open support for the Kurds in Iraq, Turkey, Syria, and parts of Iran as well. And Trump betrayed them last time in his last term. But now it's just pragmatic. It's all pragmatic. Turkey under Erdogan is a very useful ally. But maybe afterwards, if it goes back to the old days of weak coalition governments, then it'll be fine for the Americans to break Turkey up again, and then they will break up Syria with it.
Okay, so going back to Sudan then. I mean, you're somebody who's a political analyst with the Muslim opinion, with the MO. What would you say the MO on this issue is, or what should be the MO, the Muslim opinion for the Muslims out there? What opinion should we hold around Sudan? What's happening and what should happen?
Okay, so Sudan is part of our Ummah, like Palestine, like other places. The struggle in Sudan is the struggle of Palestine, it's the struggle of the Syrians, struggle of everyone who stood up against the American empire, whether they knew it or not, whether they knew they were actually rebelling against America or not. When the Arab Spring happened, most people in Tunisia and Egypt, they didn't know they were actually rebelling against America. They didn't know that. They were actually rebelling against the empire. And when we see our struggles connected, and it's actually the same struggle, then we can actually start to move forward to solve our problem, which is we have to solve our united problem, which is that we are dominated and divided by the same enemy. And to do that, we have to get rid of the tools the enemy has, and the tools the enemy uses against us. So for Sudan, we can replace the military leadership, or we can put pressure on it where it will be embarrassing for it to do anything other than what the public pressure wants. And the pressure has to be that they completely reject any solution, any negotiation, any ceasefire, anything, any mediation, any initiative that comes from the USA, that comes from the Quad, the 4 countries.
They cut out foreign intervention.
Yes, you have to cut out all the foreign interference and the foreign intervention, and then the army has to advance and end the rebellion.
To get rid of the RSF.
Defeat the rebellion, yeah, which you can do. So you destroy the American plan to divide Sudan. You also get rid of the foreign interference, and you can then bring back, the revolution goes back to where it was going, which is that old regime gone. Now we need a new regime. We need a new state. We need a new system, and it has to be an independent one. So it's not complicated as an idea. The solution is very easy in Sudan. It's hard, very difficult to implement, because there's just too much foreign interference. The army left alone can win very easily, but there's too much foreign interference. The Sudanese government right now, the military, the army is the one saying, yes, we welcome the efforts by the United States, because the actual leadership of the Sudanese army is the old regime, the client state of the USA. So they will attack the UAE on one hand, and then they will go to a meeting where the UAE is as well.
So you're saying ultimately Sudan needs to remove foreign intervention, and basically it will be able to sort out all of its problems.
We can sort our problems out.
What happens when Sudan figures out, or if foreign intervention was cut off and Sudan, pushes back the RSF and gets rid of those guys? What happens for
when a new independent state is established in Sudan, which will either immediately or inevitably become an Islamic state? That reflects actual people, and I believe that we can establish the model of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba in Sudan. It's not we do not lack in the scholarship, we do not lack in thinkers in Sudan, we do not lack in skills. And I'm just talking about the Sudanese. I'm not talking about if it's a state for Muslims from around the world will come and build it as well. In a very large and very resourceful state with a battle-hardened army as well. This revolution, if you like, this change, the overthrowing of the old Western colonial system with a new native independent Islamic one will be exported. This will move. It will move very quickly to Egypt. The people of Egypt want to get rid of the government. They do. They're just not organized. They're not mobilized. And there's people in the army who want to move against the leaderships, but they can't because they're small and the junior officers. And obviously the Egyptian military is an ironclad secular institution. So when a foreign power, in this case foreign to Egypt, comes and says to the Egyptian people, rise up, and it moves this army, the Sudanese army at this time, the Islamic army, moves into Egypt, and it invites defection from the Egyptian state, and there is revolution happening at the same time. Egypt will flip very quickly. You can unite Egypt and Sudan very fast. Egypt and Sudan used to be the one country anyway. The first separation of Sudan was the separation of Sudan from Egypt in the 50s. That's the first one anyway. And then it's domino. It's a domino effect, and we can liberate Palestine very soon, and we can unite the Ummah and get back on track as an Ummah whose role in the world is to end the worship and the submission of humans to other humans, and to bring people, all humans, to submitting to the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. And finally, just quickly, how can Muslims who are watching this play a role in all of this? What can they do?
The biggest help is in awareness, spreading awareness. Like I said, we got the bullet, we got the gun, we need to see the gunman. And we need to see the gunman. To see the gunman, we need spreading of awareness. We need people to expose the involvement of the USA and to take lessons from what the USA has been doing everywhere else as well, to stop treating Sudan as an isolated issue. It is connected to everything else in the region. It is connected by the Ummah. It is connected by sharing the same enemy, who uses the same tactics as it has used in other places. When we see the gunman and the USA is exposed for what it does in its involvement, it is the chairman that sits above the UAE and above Egypt and above Saudi. They all together run this war, this committee. When we see that and they're exposed, and it's either embarrassing for the Sudanese army now to go and listen to them, so they don't anymore, or they are forced out of power, the guys at the top, either by military officers or by popular revolution, then we will solve our problem. We brought down someone bigger than Burhan before. Bashir was much bigger than Burhan.
Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow, may Allah aid the people of Sudan and, allow the greater ummah to see that actually it was Islam that gave us honor. I think it's Umar al-Khattab who said that we were given honor by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through Islam. And if we ever seek honor through anything other than Islam, then we'll be humiliated. So inshallah, we can get to a point where we can understand that actually we go to all these different solutions, all these different avenues for seeking help, and but actually the help was always there. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was always there. The solutions were always there. It was just about reaching out to those and finding those and implementing those. But Jazakallah khair for joining us today. And for all of those at home, Jazakallah khair for watching this, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this video, and share it with your friends and your family.